Okay, so the purposes, as Mark just alluded, the purposes today, our meeting today, is to adopt both our development contributions policy and our annual plan. So it's going to be a very long day, and it'll be up to us to make sure we're not here at 9 o'clock tonight. Right? We'll only have ourselves to blame. First, we'll be dealing with our DC policy, and I'd like to welcome staff to present the report.
So, as you know, the development contribution policy has been under review since 2023. We went out for consultation at the end of February, and consultation ran through March. You heard from submitters on the policy in April alongside the annual plan. On the 19th of May, we had a workshop to discuss the feedback we received on the policy and to work through the key policy issues. The feedback that we received from you on the workshop has been fed into the final policy. I will take the report as a couple of things. So Section 8 outlines the key policy issues that we discussed in that workshop, and Section 10 details how we have incorporated the feedback that we received from submitters and the guidance that we received from you into the final policy. And we've also attached a track changes version of the policy so you can see how those changes have been made. So just in terms of the resolutions in front of you today, we are recommending you adopt the draft DC policy, which is attachment A to your report, and for the policy to come into force on the 1st of July 2025. And then just regarding resolution 6, so when we move between policies, we also think about transitional provisions, particularly where someone is significantly better off under the new policy. So the recommendation is that we remit the difference in DC charges where the per HUI charge is reduced under the 2025 policy. So for the most part, DCs will go up across the district. And we've talked about this in briefings since October. But the district that they go down is Akaroa Harbour, where the per HUI DC charge will drop from 68,000 to 44,000. Given the difference in charges is primarily due to growth projections, and there's very little growth projected in Akaroa Harbour, so any small changes do make a big difference. We think it's a fair thing to remit the difference in DCs. This only applies where a consent has not been given effect to, and therefore it affects only a very small number of consents. There's only 7 that would be granted that remission if you were to grant it. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, right. So this is questions to staff on what we've just heard. We'll get the amendments if there are any in a minute. Is there any questions to staff? Brilliant, thank you, well done. Okay, so I will move and Pauline will second recommendations 1 to 6. We're moving second them only. This is just to put the draft DC policy on the table and open up any debate for any proposed amendments. Okay, proposed amendments.
Can I just flag the ones on the screen?
Not just yet.
Oh, not yet?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically one is just to make the central city its own catchment, and the second one is to update the DC charging in line with the current annual plan capital program because it's been reduced so much. Aaron was happy to second this. Yeah.
Okay.
Can we ask questions now?
Can you ask questions of? Yes.
Let's start off with that.
Yep, well, yes. And then I write, and then this is what I read, right? This is what I read. I note no amendments have been received, so that's good because we're starting off very well. I'll now ask councillors if they have any amendments, and here we are, but Sam's got one, which is good.
Two.
Yep, once we have received and clarified the all potential amendments, we will then take a short break while staff gather the relevant information on rates impacts. Once you've raised your amendment, please email it to Sam, which we've got, and it's on the screen, including your second, which we've got. Councillors raise their hands at the amendment. Sam's done that. So if there's only the one, Sam, do we take the slight break so we can do it?
Can we see it again?
Yeah. Yep.
They do need rewording.
Yes.
During the break.
Yeah. Okay. But do I now do questions of Sam and Aaron now? Or start?
Both. So councillors can ask questions of the mover, and then they can also ask questions of staff to clarify any compromise, unless staff need a break first.
Probably useful to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll help you digest what you've got to do. So Pauline's got a hand up, and I saw Jake and Yanni, I saw.
With the first part of that, was there any submitters that suggested that to us? Do we know?
I believe so. We can.
We did receive feedback on the catchments more generally. And so some people have said they would like smaller catchments, more localized catchments, but I don't believe we received a specific submission on CBD catchment from memory.
Right, and then the other question is, if we kicked it to touch to the long-term plan, does that take us outside of the 3-year review period? That's the year after next.
5 years intensifications.
The second part of the amendment, if we deferred it to the LTP.
In terms of the second amendment, this policy is based on LTP 2024 capital program. It's not based on the annual plan 2025 capital program. So any decisions you make today would be reflected when we update the DC policy next year. So the 2021 policy is based on outdated capital program figures. So you're currently charging development contributions that do not reflect the council's actual cost to deliver growth infrastructure. So if you were to delay the policy further, then you're just continuing to bake in that under. And just to remember back to your briefings, when it comes to growth infrastructure, there's two people who can pay for it, so the developers or its ratepayers. So if you defer DCs, then that cost will be covered by rates.
So the resolution that we had before us that comes into effect July this year, 2025. Yep. If we deferred it to the LTP, that's 2027, that's 2 years away. Which means we could be picking up a lot of growth costs.
Yes,
because
so
we're not charging enough.
When you say we, it's the ratepayers,
Yes.
correct? 2 years.
Or the government's authorising it on behalf of the ratepayers.
It's only one lot of money which comes from ratepayers. Just there was the question Pauline asked, but do you have a quantum of what that deficit would look like?
Yeah, we provided that in the briefings. It is just based on modelling, so it's based on the projects that are in the 2021 capital program, annual inflation and interest predictions in both of those capital programs, and then also based on the growth projections in 2021 and 2024 to project those revenue estimates. We can recirculate those if required, but they were provided in previous briefings.
I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, given the amendment.
Can everyone speak up, because I'm struggling to hear?
Do you want to change seats?
I just need a hearing aid. That's
Yeah, good. Yanni, did you have a question too? Yanni?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering what the impact of having a central city zone within the 4 hours will do on the neighbouring zones. Like, does it change? I'm trying to understand what the change will be in terms of the charges. Like, does it mean that other zones will pay more or pay less?
So we don't know. So when we produce DC charges, the first thing and then we allocate growth to each of those catchments, and then we identify the growth projects in the capital program, and we figure out which catchments benefit from those projects, and then we take the cost of the growth component of each activity per catchment and then divide it by the growth in that catchment to get the charges. So it's quite a long process to produce DC charges. It takes about 3 months, and we have no way of knowing what would happen to the charges until we follow that process through. It's not necessarily correct to assume that DC charges in the central city would necessarily be lower than other areas. They're not lower in our 2021 policy. There are infill areas that have lower DCs in the central city, and that's been true in past policies as well. We've had past policies where CBD charges have actually been higher than some suburban areas. So there's just really no way to know.
So the impact of this could be, if you wanted to get more residential within the 4 hours, it could be perverse. It could increase the costs of DCs for those properties.
The strategic goal for the central city, you're best to deal with that through a rebate scheme, because it allows you to be more flexible in what you're going to require in development contributions. The LGA is really prescriptive in terms of how you set DCs, and it doesn't allow a ton of flexibility to further your strategic goals. So we've got 2 rebate schemes that are currently up for consultation, one on the life of existing demand credits and one on high-rise residential development. So yeah, a rebate scheme is probably the better way to deal with that. And then also just noting that the amendment noting the council desire to increase the population in the CBD, that is a different issue to our growth projections that are what determine the charges for development contributions.
I'm just wondering like how we can even consider this amendment today without the information.
We couldn't unless we were doing a policy decision on the policy. It would take us 3 months.
So you need an additional resolution to defer.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, mine was a follow-up to that. So we, in the briefings, it was raised whether we should do the CBD as a standalone. Like, I think I might have even asked about it, but we were told it would take 3 months to get that information together. And as a group, we didn't give guidance to ask for that work to be done. Yeah. And so what's the impact? I mean, if this isn't legally able to be put today, what's the impact of us deferring a decision on DCs for 3 months until we find out? What's the impact of deferring?
Do that in the break stuff.
Oh no, Alan can answer.
All right.
Yeah.
What's the impact if we decided, if councillors were of a mind to get some information so that we could make a decision on whether or not to have a central city catchment, apart from the fact that we should have done that 3 months ago, we could make the decision today. What would be the impact of deferring this decision for 3 months and that to enable to get this information?
So that was the advice that we gave in February. We wouldn't bring anything back to you. This term of council, we'd look to start again with DCs 101 with the new council, and then we could reconsider what the new council.
So we'd have to do the whole thing again.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'd have to start from the scratch.
And in the meantime, and in the meantime, ratepayers will be picking up the deficit.
So just to clarify that, Alan, you're saying that we consult on the policy again, go through the process.
But in terms of just producing those new charges, it would take at least 3 months, and then
Tim?
So if we did ask to look at or investigate a central city separate area, it could possibly push extra costs to development in those, the golden ring, if you like, where it's Addington, Riccarton, Sprayed, and all those areas, St Albans, that when you drive through, there is no shortage. Most of them are probably Airbnb, but we won't go there. So that would add, that could add extra cost to those developments rather than the central CBD area.
it's hard to know until we. It depends on where benefit has been allocated for those projects. So where growth is projected for each of those catchments. There's just really no way to know. So it could be that charges increase in certain parts of the city if we took a new approach to catchments, but we wouldn't know what that is.
But we almost use that as a controlling measure to try and encourage development in areas we would prefer it, i.e. within the 4 hours.
If you were looking to encourage development in certain areas, probably better to do that through a rebate, just because there's no way to know what the charges would be until you go through the process of drawing catchments and then doing the cost allocations and then running the model. So it's a there's no way to know what the outcome would be when you start redrawing the catchments.
Pauline again.
Yeah, just in the light of the responses we've had from staff, I'd just like to ask Sam if you still want to proceed, or do you think it might be better to withdraw this? Because as we've heard, a rebate scheme is probably the best way to deal with bringing a new build into the city. And also we would probably have to start again and the whole process again.
I've got one question for the team and then I'm happy to come back.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was just around the second one, around the updating the capital program. So what, if we're going to be doing that on an annual basis, what happens for the next 12 months? Because we've obviously knocked through Tyrone and Victoria a significant amount off the capital program.
So the DC policy collects projects that are in the capital program over 10 years, not over 3. So if you push projects out, they still stay in the DC policy, and then we just adjust the interest and inflation.
So what would
So-
sorry, you go.
Sorry. So my understanding is the capital program itself is around the same size between LTP 24 and annual plan 25. It's just that projects have been deferred for deliverability reasons. And so therefore the total capex that you're collecting DCs for wouldn't change.
But I don't understand that, because the issue we've got is that the LTP is significantly overcooked in terms of capital budget. In terms of what we're rating for versus what we can charge over the 10-year period is way more than we can deliver for.
Nice and loud, please. Yes.
While it's true in year one, there has been a deliverability review, rephasing some of the expenditure. The overall expenditure 25 to 34 is largely unchanged between the long-term plan and the annual plan, and the DC policy doesn't just look at any one individual year of capital
So I get
expenditures.
that. I completely, you did right. The issue I've got is that, by our own admission, we've reduced our capital budget by 70 million this year because we can't deliver it, which then means we've pushed it into following years, yet we can't deliver what's already in the budget. So by definition, our 10-year capital program is significantly overstated, and we're charging for that. Or am I might be missing something.
We don't borrow, we borrow for it when we need it. So in fact, we're not really charging till we borrow for it. We don't borrow.
Charging for what we can't deliver, which is illegal.
And interest in.
So we're rating 500, but we've dropped down 70 because we can't deliver, but we've rated for 500 million. So somewhere there's $70 million floating around of ratepayers' money. That's really what you're trying to
That
get at.
becomes a surplus which we apply to reduce rates, so they get it back anyway.
I mean, I wonder, it doesn't seem like the will of the room is to pass these. I wonder if potentially people will be amenable to lining it up so that we actually come back and deal with this when we have the consultation closed on the scheme. So that we've actually got a full picture of what the DCs look like, because it's not too long, and I'm just sensing the mood of the room isn't necessarily to go down this path, but it might be to actually delay this and deal with it all in one. So we get the consultation back, and then we know what levers we can pull to drive that growth.
So you withdrawing it or putting it?
Well, I'm just trying to test the room as to whether, I'm happy to keep these up there, but if it's, given we're doing an annual
Sam,
plan.
that doesn't actually change anything, because it still leaves staff advice as a rebate scheme is the best way to address growth in the city, not development contribution.
Yeah, but, so let's leave them up, and I'll just add another amendment, which is if these fail, we defer the whole thing until we've concluded on the consultation of the DC scheme. So it gives everyone the chance to vote on these, and then if we can just put a third one up, please. And
Let's do the third one. And then if we can do it all
actually,
together.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so can we go first to deferring the scheme until we make decisions on the
Aye.
Rebate.
I've got it, yeah.
Not at that bit yet. Not at that bit. I'll do Victoria, James and Sarah.
My question's no longer required because Sarah's hit it on the head. That's where I was heading.
No problem. James?
Yeah, you all captured it perfectly, but I guess I just want to put it to
staff more there, because I guess my fear with all of this is what I've gathered through all of your briefings is that essentially a rebate scheme is going to be the most effective way to incentivise the outcome which we want more of. What was your view that this risks being the cart before the horse, because we haven't even got not only do we not have a rebate scheme, we haven't even consulted or got the results back from consultation on a rebate scheme. So is there a risk that we approve a policy that is essentially earmarked to incentivise the outcome that we want based on having a rebate scheme, and then there's the risk there that we don't end up having a rebate scheme. So we've got the worst of both worlds. Do you have a view on that? Is a cart before the horse?
Rebate schemes is really up to it's a cash decision of council. The DC policy and the rebates are two separate issues. So DC policy is how you recover the cost of growth infrastructure that's already in your capital program. The DC rebates are how you incentivise certain development types by waiving DCs. So those two decisions can exist separately, and what you choose to do with rebates is really up to the council. We'll bring a report back in August once we've finished consultation.
It's just time though.
They are two different things.
Yeah.
Just checking, what's the time frame for having the rebate scheme back to council for a decision?
Consultation closes on the 14th of July, and then we'll analyse those submissions. We bring you a workshop, and then we'll bring a report on the rebate schemes consideration. So we're thinking August sometime.
June, July. So we just have a couple of months potentially, and so if we delayed today's decision till then, maybe August, hopefully August, then when would it be implemented? So it'll be the 1st of September or 1st of October?
So consents pay under the development contribution policy that's in place at the time the complete consent application is received. So if you delay adopting the policy, then people just continue to pay under the 2020 policy until the new policy gets adopted.
Yeah, but would we be looking at the new adoption sort of an official date?
Yeah,
so if we,
to push the
it'd be the
adoption
1st of September or something.
Yeah.
So we'd lose July and August, we'd lose a couple of months of contribution. So ratepayers will be funding sort of 2 months worth of.
Yes, that's a good council.
So that's the main implication, is that loss of revenue for those additional months that the policy is not adopted.
And do we have an impact on rates for that? Because there would be an impact on rates. We'd need to work that out for today's decision anyway.
So my understanding is the DC charge, sorry, the annual plan uses the LTP DC projections, which are based on DC policy. So don't, yeah. So the decision you make with regards to DC shouldn't impact the decision you make regarding the annual plan.
So we're not currently budgeting to get in more money in DCs in our draft annual plan.
The 2021 LTP, 2024 LTP, sorry, uses the 2021 projections.
Okay. Is that because you didn't know what the,
Noting that DCs are a little bit uncertain exactly what you get, because it's driven by what
so we tend to
applications lodged
undercook
with.
it and then we get in a bit more than we expect, hopefully by the end of the year.
Can happen like that.
Ellen, one wee question from me. I know we talked about, Sam's talked about the that money out of the capital program, 70 odd million. Not all of that is growth stuff. That's just a lot. I don't know what the number is, but a percentage of that will be just business as usual stuff, not DC attracting type.
So your cost drivers are either renewals, backlog, so meeting a level of service, an increased level of service, or growth. So we only charge DCs for the growth component of your capital program. So I believe it's 923 million is in the draft DC policy, and the 2021 DC policy uses, I think it's $730 million. So yeah, just the growth component of your capital program.
No, that's cool.
Can I just check with you, Alan, around if there was this deferment till August, would that allow the DCs to be calculated on the new annual plan? that be enough time or wouldn't?
No, we wouldn't have time to do that. The asset planners would need to do the cost allocations for everything that has changed, and then we need to rerun the model. It's quite a manual process to produce those charges, and I don't think we would have them ready in time. The other thing is those charges would be different, and we'd have to consult on those charges. So we are looking to move to annual updates of the DC policy to reflect a more updated capital program noting that DC policy and what the capital is.
And second point of clarification, just around the catchments, it wouldn't allow enough time to do. We couldn't do that, address that issue either.
And we also need to consult, so anytime you change the charges, we need to consult on those new charges. So if we were to redraw the catchments, we would need to reconsult on a new policy.
Couple more questions, Sarah, and then Pauline.
Thanks. So you say it was $730 million of DCs expected over the 10 years, the growth component for 10 years?
Over 30 years. So there's $730 million worth of growth RTP 2021. That's in our 2021. To be collected over up to 30 years. So we collect over the life of the loan, the capacity, which is 30 years, capacity of the asset or life of the asset, whichever one happens first. So DCs is kind of a long game in terms of collecting.
Yeah. But I was trying to work out how much we would be expecting to collect in DCs maybe in FY25.
Between $35 and $50 million a year.
Okay. And so 2 months with that could be a few $1 million. And so potentially the 2 months where we have the difference could be $1 million or something that ratepayers will be covering.
It depends what kind of consents we get in. That would kind of influence the DC charges. There's a lot that kind of goes into what someone would pay in development contributions. There was also a bit of a lead-in time with DCs because you assessed at the point of submitting your consent, and then it might be 2 years before you actually pay your DCs. So there is a bit of a kind of a build-in time.
Absolutely, yeah. But there is potential for it to be quite a substantial
Consents we get in the next
$2 million maybe.
Just noting too that we've already had a surge in consents being lodged before
Yeah,
the vote. It's gone up about 30-40% in consent numbers.
So if we delay further, will it give more people time to get more consents in and at the lower cost and not be paying for growth? That makes
Surge in
It's just
front-loading development impact.
But they don't have to do it now, they're just getting the consent in, but so they're assessed at the lower charge, even if they don't build for a couple of years. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so the more we delay it, the less money we get in to pay for growth and the more ratepayers have to pay.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm flagging is a lot of people have already done that, so we expect now that there'll be less consents after July for a period.
There'll be a lag.
To agree.
And you're right, Alan, we'll take like sort of subdivision, you know what you're going to pay, but sometimes from the start to the finish, it might be 2 years in between before the council actually gets the money in their bottom of hands. Okay, Pauline, and
Just, you mentioned reviewing the charges annually going forward, so we do that as part of our annual.
We're still
The
working
same
out.
consultation.
We're still working out how that would be the most resource efficient way of doing that, whether that is with the annual plan or doing that just slightly behind the annual plan. But yeah, we are looking to.
Right. Thank you.
and Sam.
Just two things. So what we're saying though is at the moment in the annual plan, we bake in 21 DC projected revenue. In the annual plan that we're striking, hopefully later today, we're baking in the 21 DC revenue, the projections.
Using the charges.
Yes. So yes, it's based on growth. Sorry, it's based on DC revenue from the 2021 policy, because it's so which is based on the LTP 2024 DC revenue projections.
Okay. So there'd be no change to that today though if we deferred this by 2 months.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Thanks.
But going forward, Alan, you're going to start doing this annually, which is going to.
Yeah. Because because the program increased so significantly between 2021 and 2024. It's just a long sort of lead-in period to not be actually recovering the cost of growth infrastructure. So if we can update it more regularly, we can kind of catch that stuff faster.
A lot of times the boat has left the wharf and you're sitting there, what do we do now? So, okay, so righto everyone, we will have, thank you, very good questions. We will have a break. I'm not quite sure how long it'll be, so we'll gather some information and then we'll come back. So thank you for your patience. We'll see you soon. Staff will just provide any information that we need to consider on the one amendment, or maybe two, depending how it goes. So we'll go ahead with staff if they've got the information, and I'm sure Sam and or Aaron or anyone can have their input into what we're discussing. So far away.
Information on the different.
Yep, it's just Sam's one. Do you want to talk to it?
Or I think we'll just debate and then.
You can do, but this is just a chance for anyone to ask any more questions.
Oh, yeah,
Is there any more information that's come back from staff about what we were talking about? You're comfortable? Okay, so you've changed your amendments around a whisker.
So we're just gonna, well, the mood of the room didn't seem to be to take the other one. So we've just said, can we just logically defer it and line it all up with the scheme? So I've withdrawn the other ones, which were, people were sort of, which there didn't seem to be a move for, but there is one to just line it all up. And yeah.
Okay, all right. Well,
I've got a question.
yes, far away. Oh, this man. Yes.
If there's two results for the rebate scheme. One is that do that in Central City. So if we did do it, what would you want to see happen with development contributions? And if we did,
Say that again, sorry.
so there's two possible results of the rebate scheme.
Yep.
Can you tell me what would happen in each of those scenarios so I can see what the likely outcome of this would be?
I don't understand you. Sorry, I don't understand.
If the rebate scheme is approved.
Yep.
What would you then want to happen with development contributions policy? Would you put up the amendments you had before for that or not?
We'll need to see what the consultation is. But this just means we can make one decision at once.
Yeah, but you're wanting to change.
Well, they've told me I can't. Basically, my initial plan was to, so I know what you're saying now. So my initial plan was to reduce the capital budget because I think over the 10 years it's significantly higher and we are overcharging. But the mood of the room wasn't to do that work, and the team have said they're not going to be able to do it by August. So all I've said is, can we just make sure that we can get to a point in October that something still works for the CBD? Because I guess the challenge would be if the schemes were voted down, then council may have a different view on the DCs.
So if the schemes go in, you would vote for.
Well, I wouldn't predetermine the consultation. I mean, let's hear from them.
That's the question she
That's a
asked.
different.
But you haven't answered the question. If the rebate scheme is supported through consultation and the council supports the rebate scheme.
Yeah.
Will you then make any changes to the development contributions policy as
Well,
we've had in our papers
The team have
today?
told me that we potentially can't. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we can't look at something if we have to. I would have liked to think the schemes go through, but we'll have to wait and see.
Just one clarification on the issue around the LTP and the annual plan and what it does to DCs.
Push projects out to improve deliverability of the capital program. The DC model factors in when the asset will be delivered as part of the calculation of the charges. So if the project delivery date changes, we update this when we run the model. So the model is designed to ensure that council's total costs after accounting for interest and inflation are recovered from DCs. So if a project is pushed out into a later year on the LTP, there may be a very minor change to the DC charge, but it wouldn't necessarily go down because if pushing it out, we're adjusting for the inflation cost of delivering that project. So if you push it out into a later year, it's likely to be more expensive to the council to deliver, and therefore we will recover the cost in DCs. So any changes you make today would likely have a very minor impact on the DC
So
charges.
can you just explain to me, because I must be, just so I can clarify it. So at the moment, we've reduced our capital budget for this year by $70 million. which by definition means that next year, because we haven't reduced that budget, that is overstated by $70 million. Same in the following year. So that's 700 million over the 10 years. Are we saying that there is no impact on DCs because we've got 700 million more in the capital program?
The capital program has stayed the same over 10-year.
That's my point.
Over 10 years, and it's only the growth component of the infrastructure that's in the capital program.
Yep.
As long as the projects over 10 years stay the same, it doesn't matter if they get pushed out, we still collect
That's
DCs
my
as long
point,
as they're
though.
in the capital.
That's my point, is the capital program can't stay the same. How can it?
There's only a component of it that's DCs, remember?
We send out a don't flush message at one point.
I'm genuinely maybe missing something, but I can't see how we can have 700 million more in a capital program and it stay the same. What am I missing?
Through here, it's a really good question, through you, your worship, a good question, councillor McDonald, but I don't think that it would be 70, that 70 million won't accumulate, or wouldn't it be anticipated to accumulate? So we're still anticipating delivering the full program.
But we
within
can't.
10 years. And so the idea being, though, I think that the principle is that the DCs are looked at on an annual basis to reflect what is going to be the program going forward, I think is the intention within the policy. So we are not, and how much at the moment it's getting pushed out by and delivered, we're still working through, but in the next year or two, we are resizing the program and the DC charges are reviewed in contemplation of a resized program some years down the track.
That's exactly my, I mustn't be explaining it well. That's exactly my point, is we've got a budget on there now, we can't deliver it all, we've pushed it into next year, we'll get to next year and we can't deliver all of that, but yet our DC model prices that in.
Bigger number.
Yeah.
DC model's not calculated on the capital program.
I mean, it's probably not something we need to spend heaps of time on today, but it physically, unless I've missed something, you can't have money in a budget you don't spend for 10 years and push them. All we've done is spread the 70 million from this year we've deferred over the next 10, which when we get to next year, we will do exactly the same thing. So by definition, we've got more in the capital program than what we charge.
How that's relevant to the DCs, because DCs is a component of that, and that's calculated.
It's the delivery of,
Yeah.
but it's probably not a useful conversation to have for the half an hour now.
That's interesting.
I find it really
Yeah,
interesting.
no, that's actually, yeah. 'cause
Okay, no, that's good.
if you get rid of 700 million,
Thank God, just one thing, we're doing really well today because the other day I was away and actually listened into this. The microphone is so sensitive. If there's cross chat, it just turns into people listening. It's awful. So we're doing real good. So just watch we don't fall into that. So
Do you go back and watch old meetings? Is that what you do?
and you thought my life was sad.
People like to say anything.
It is.
Yes, Sarah.
Thanks so much. So with the capital program, so we're only really talking about the growth component of the capital program. What happens, and this may not be a question for you, it might be a sort of one of the infrastructure people. What happens if we don't actually do those growth related capital projects over the next 10 years, especially when we're due to grow by 30,000, which is like the size of Timaru or Rolleston? What happens if we push those projects out and don't do them, put them down the road? So
But there's two.
it might be someone who's more on the infrastructure.
But there's council projects and there's private developments.
Be Pauline, but it's the if we don't do those, all of that, the upgrades and stuff, what happens then to our city as we're growing by 30,000 in 10 years and don't do the growth capital projects?
Because we haven't charged.
Probably a different question than DCs.
Yeah, but if we're talking
Getting a
about
few
possibly
consider-
deferring capital projects to the try and lower DCs,
It relates to
it
council.
relates, it's related to Councillor McDonald's amendment.
Not all capital projects are DC carrying things.
No, I'm only talking about the DC growth components. If our infrastructure isn't keeping up with the population growth, what happens to us as a city.
That's not the, and maybe I haven't explained it well at all for the last 6 months when we're talking about the capital program. But it is the delivery of the capital program, not what is on budget. And what we're saying is you could have $1 billion on budget, but if you can only deliver 600, then just have the 600 on budget.
Yeah, but we're only talking about the growth component, which is only like.
Correct, but then you've got your renewals and your normal BAU stuff.
Yeah.
So you need to have conversations, but there's no point putting it all on budget if you can't deliver it. That isn't that, I thought that's what the LTP said and the annual plan direction from it was unanimous through council.
I just haven't had an answer though. What happens if we don't do that growth component of our capital program? There's options though, Sam. So I know that we could decide not to do those growth things, and that might save a small amount of.
It's not the deciding; it's the ability to do it.
But there is the potential to gear up to do it, right?
Takes time.
It does take time.
You can't do it just like
An
that.
annual plan debate.
No,
then
you
the
can't
DC.
do it. They've never been able to deliver it. We set a goal, we never.
For the
get
full
there,
capital
point,
program.
And then we charge for the goal, the Sam's point.
And how degraded is our core infrastructure right now because of that?
It's the delivery, not the budget.
Yeah.
Delivery ramp over time.
Yeah, it can if we choose
But
to.
it never does.
It's not a
Keep
DC.
pushing it
Okay,
down.
righto, moving right along, Melanie.
My question's probably more for Beat. It's around, there's delivery of, you've got your budget and you can deliver it or not deliver all of it. But it could be that we could halve our capital budget potentially. But it could be that the DCs potentially may not actually change compared to a full budget if the projects that we cut are not related to growth. So it's all your capital budget's all about. Have I got that right? So it's possible you could totally shrink down your capital budget but not change the DCs required because all those projects are for growth.
Yeah,
That's right.
So DC is just a component of your capital program.
Yeah.
DCs.
So
And to just also note that we'll be revising the schedule of assets annually as well, so that will sort of
And that's good.
keep catching up.
Okay, this is good. Sorry, Ellen, were you waving your hand to say something?
We also collect DCs for up to over 30 years. So your LTP is 10 years, but then people pay for it for a much longer period than the LTP. So it's spread across a lot of new household units, essentially, not just those that are paying, in the next year or so.
Okay, righto. So we'll now hold one debate. Sorry, Tim, I didn't see you.
Slightly on a different topic, because this is a bit boring now. The fact of the matter is, when I mentioned about the 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom lack of, and someone mentioned, well, you can do that through a rebate scheme. Could at some stage we have a look at that, a workshop or whatever, because I'd like to see a rebate scheme that's actually worked and what we could do, because irrelevant of what we were talking about, we have a tsunami of 1 and 2-bedroom apartments being built, or townhouses if you want, and we are going to be really struggling to get families, etc., in the 4 avenues or anywhere where there are no 3 and 4 bedroom. Because if you try and find a 3 or 4 bedroom apartment or townhouse, the price is going through the roof of those because they are the ones in demand. So just totally on a separate issue, but it is a really important one for our city.
Right. We will now hold one debate for, I'll say, all the amendments, the amendment and the substantive motion, all in the same one. So who would like to go first? We've got 3 minutes each person. Pauline.
Well, anyway, I'm keen to support the staff recommendation and pass this today. I don't see the point in kicking it to touch. And I also feel that I'm just really wondering if we really do need to continue to incentivise the rebuild of the central city. I think we've passed that point now. We're going to be holding them back soon, potentially. That'd be nice. But I think that period has kind of passed. Everyone wants to come to Christchurch. I think we've reached that point where there's going to be a huge surge in development there. But I'm not preempting my decision on the rebate scheme that's coming back to us. So we'll look at what the submissions and the submitters say on that. But for now, I don't see any reason to defer or delay this because you know, rebate scheme we've been told is the best way to incentivise developments anyway. So I just think let's get on with it today. Thank you.
Well, the point of the DC's policy and collecting DCs from developers is to fund their growth projects. And so, you know, at the moment, if we don't make this decision today, we've heard clearly that we're not charging enough for DCs, and we will need to do those growth projects no matter the size of the capital budget. So actually all we're doing is pushing the cost onto the ratepayers, which hopefully everyone's not going to be trying to do in the next section of today. So I just can't understand the point of delaying this. Also, waiting on the rebate scheme, we've already heard from developers in the news that rebate schemes don't work. We know the previous one didn't work. So what's the point of waiting to find out what the consultation says for that? Not, you know, in terms of the DC's policy, obviously we need it for whether we decide around a rebate. I think they're two separate issues, and we need to fund growth and we need developers to fund the growth. We can't expect our ratepayers to do that. It's wholly unfair.
Yeah, so just firstly, as developers don't fund anything, they facilitate the development of the property and pass the cost on to the future homeowner, whether they own it or rent it. The cost gets passed on, every single cost gets passed on. There's just no way around that. So just clarify that to start with. But I would rather, given that we have a council that's very keen to up the number of people living in the inner city, that we did this at the same time that we look at a rebate scheme, just so the two align. And there may be no changes, but there could be a lot of changes, and that will depend on that feedback. So being one of those open-minded councillors that isn't predetermined on how this will go, I will just wait until we get that feedback and then assess it then in a couple of months. Like has already been said to us by staff, John made it pretty clear, we had a run of applications going in. Will we get another run? More people trying to commit to building more properties in town that will eventually pay rates for the next 100 years could be a problem to deal with, but it just means there'll be more housing, unfortunately.
Okay, Sarah then James.
So it worries me that there is talk of deferring growth-related capital projects. I mean, Christchurch is growing, just Christchurch, potentially 33,000 in the next 10 years. So that's the size of the existing Rolleston, which is huge. It's bigger than Timaru, and all of that within the Christchurch City District. So talk of deferring those growth-related projects is a problem. Delivery of the overall capital program can be dealt with, but those specific projects, if we don't do those, there's the potential for our city to sort of grind to a halt and not have the capacity for the things to become more expensive over time. Deferring this decision actually doesn't help anyone, but it does add additional costs for ratepayers. We've heard already that it's not possible to make the other potential amendments without reconsulting. And I don't think we're going to be of a mind to do that or make a decision to do that in August. And that would further add costs to residents as well. It's a really tough balance between trying to make sure that growth pays for growth, but also making sure that people can have affordable homes to live in, and those first homes do wear the cost of those development contributions. But it's also not fair for the wider ratepayer base to be subsidising the home ownership. The housing market is broken. How we build our homes, all of those costs, but that's something that needs to be dealt with at a national level. We need to focus on the things that we can do here without increasing costs to ratepayers too high. Yeah, I think the DC policy is completely separate to the DC rebate scheme. They do completely different things. You do not need to make those decisions together, which is why we didn't consult on them together in the first place. So I'm happy for just the policy to be adopted today and to distribute the costs fairly. We go.
James.
Thanks. Look, I've seconded this amendment because adopting the DC policy now, before we consider the central city rebate scheme, I feel acutely gets the car before the horse. Are we past the point of incentivising more of what we need? No, obviously not. What is certain is that with the status quo, we're on track to epically fail our own self-imposed goal of having 20,000 residents in the CBD by 2028. So we're currently sitting at around 9,000 residents. Increasing development costs of central city residential will just simply increase the price of the housing stock and will decrease the feasibility of the developments. So in terms of this amendment, aligning the policy will ensure that we consider these issues together to ensure that the foreign policy is coherent, coordinated, and actually supports the growth objectives we ourselves have set as a council. It makes far more sense to align the DC policy with the rebate policy than to lock in one in isolation, because they're intrinsically connected.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McDonald, for raising that amendment. I'm likely to support that today because I think it raises some really important issues. And I recognise there's a lot of work that's gone into this this policy development, and it's the rebate scheme is also out for consultation. I keep hearing that they are different, but I'm of the view that the net effect of it is still the same. And this is a really complex piece of policy, and it has many moving parts, as we've seen today. I just don't think that this issue should be shoehorned into the artificial timeline created by the requirements of our annual plan. We really ought to be considering it at the same time when it's all in front of us. Because I think that we should be utilising all the levers, not just leaving it open to the rebate scheme. I recognise that it returns to normal DCs in line with 2021, but I question the timing and the extent insofar as it affects the central city. We do a lot of work where we're tweaking around the edges, and all too often we spend far too much time on some of those things. But this decision is actually one of the bigger decisions for us, and we ought to be looking at it more closely with a full suite of information in front of us. So it's the wider lens that I'm looking at today when we're looking at this decision, because we've got that overarching goal to rebuild our city centre. We want a thriving and a prosperous inner city. And there's no doubt that we have upward lift in the centre of the city. We've got it in the residential and in the commercial sectors. We have momentum. I disagree with Deputy Mayor Cotter. We're not there yet. Councillor Goff referred to the fact that we're not there yet. And I just think that this policy shift really flies in the face of our goal to achieve that density in our city. And so this decision for me is all about risk. And I don't want to risk derailing or slowing down momentum that we and others have built really hard to achieve. So yeah, my preference is not to deal with this in isolation. I want to have a look at it when we had all the information in front of us. So I'm going to be supporting that amendment. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, agree. We need to prioritise growth projects. That's what we've got plans and long-term plans for. But I think, to be clear, adopting this plan would still not be charging enough for building out now and greenfield developments, in my view, even if we adopt the plan. And I disagree with the plan that means that places building in inner Christchurch that might put 5 two-bedroom units on one place, they're paying similar amounts in DCs. Someone building a standalone 4-bedroom home out in Kennedy's Bush, which is on new roads. Then you've got new roads to service, new parks to service, and everything else that ultimately increases the rating burden. The key transport corridors in the city were identified a very, very long time ago. I'd actually be going further and just incentivising building in the city. We should be also incentivising building along those transit routes. But the thing is, someone can live central right by 5 bus routes. They pay the same in public transport infrastructure in their DCs as someone who's building a new home miles away from the nearest bus stop. So that ultimately means that a developer might put in 5 units in right at a bus stop. They're ultimately subsidising new bus stop infrastructure for a developer who's deciding to build miles away from public transport. And that's ultimately what this policy does. So I wasn't intending to support it anyway. It was mentioned last time that if you want to change something, you bring amendments, but to amend the catchments and everything else is a process that will take a number of months. There wasn't necessarily the appetite to do that. But that's just simply my view on this policy. I've never felt comfortable with it overall. And I do feel a lot more comfortable looking at the two together with rebates. If we're incentivising building up in the central city, that's then consistent with everything else we are trying to do. So anything we can do to do that is important, but I'd be reluctant to have a policy that actively financially incentivises building, for example, two-storey places in the central city in really prime spots, which might be a waste of space and not helpful at all. But I look forward to seeing the results of that feedback. But yeah, just make the point that areas like Selwyn right now are absolutely crying out for help with their infrastructure. DCs are not covering the cost of what it costs to cater for all these. And yeah, changing the policy doesn't necessarily fix all that either. But we've got a real problem on our hands. And I feel like we're sleepwalking our way sometimes into building a mini Auckland with insufficient public transport routes if we're not doing enough to make sure people are building on those transit routes, not building in the middle of nowhere with no bus routes, or even footpath nearby. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe the question that should have been asked and answered is certainly the one perhaps that ratepayers will be asking when they're listening to this is what's happened to the 70 million that got taken off the capital program which we couldn't deliver? That's a really good question. The fact of the matter is we have brought up rebate schemes without knowing why they were installed by those that installed them, what was wanting to be achieved by them, and what was achieved by them when they were going blind. I think that's the information that we need before we look at a rebate scheme, because today I've been told both, yeah, it's the way to go is a rebate scheme, not DCs, which is absolutely, it's correct. And then, rebate schemes don't work. If it doesn't work, then why are we wasting ratepayers' money getting staff to look at them? I want to know why they've installed, who installed them, and what was wanted to be achieved, and actually what was achieved by them, and look at some really good examples. That's what we need with the rebate schemes. With the DCs, we have a capital program. We've said that we haven't been able to reach it. Our staff doing outstandingly well with the capital projects that they are given to do. They're doing incredibly well. If the infrastructure support is not there to deliver, you cannot force companies to upscale their crew and their equipment to suddenly 2 years later or so, suddenly there's a downturn and they've got a whole lot of crew and equipment unemployed on the dole, whatever. We've got to be careful how we move forward. It's got to be balanced. I like the questions that were asked by Councillor McDonald. I think I want to see the answers, so I'll be supporting the amendments. Thank you.
Yanni.
Yeah, I find this quite tricky because I agree with Councillor Moore that the policy, in my view, doesn't charge enough for people in the greenfields, the urban sprawl. And what it does is it actually puts in a significant increase in DCs to people who are building on brownfield sites to cover the cost of the urban sprawl. Having said that, there's a number of things that we need to do, and I completely concur with Councillor Moore that as a city we are not investing enough in the mitigation of the impact of growth on our communities. So not only does the greenfield areas lack the public transport that's been mentioned, but in brownfield areas where we're seeing massive amounts of intensification, there are very little to few projects that are actually addressing the environmental and the community impacts of higher density, multi-storey, multi-unit developments going in on streets that simply cannot cater for the increase in traffic, for the increase in stormwater runoff. And instead what we're seeing is a backlash in the community against that type of development because of the negative consequences it's having. So what we actually need to do is invest more in dealing with the impact of the growth in our communities into local projects that mitigate and offset the impact of what those new developments are. I drove around my ward when it floods, and what's striking is to go past the multi-unit dwellings that have been newly built, and see the ponding of the water that's now ponding outside the roads and the footpaths in those local neighbourhoods. So if we don't support this today, my concern is that we actually We've heard from staff time and time again, and credit to staff. I don't know how anyone could ask for more information on this when we have had for 2 years extensive information from staff, extensive briefings. But the key thing is, if we don't adopt this today, we are actually putting significant impact onto our ratepayers to cover the cost of things that should be covered by development contributions. Staff have been really clear that the longer we leave this, the greater the cost is on ratepayers as opposed to developers who are generally benefiting from these current DCs, which are lower than what they should be. So I'm torn because on one hand, I don't like some elements of this policy, but I cannot say that we should delay it anymore because staff have done a huge amount of work, and we need to get to a point where we approve it so we can start charging the DCs that reflect the growth projects that we need to be done sooner rather than later.
Jake, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree with Councillor Johansson anymore. This is actually the perfect and most appropriate moment to consider this policy. As part of your annual plan and as part of your capital program, that's exactly when you should put in place a policy. If you want to then subsequently rebate that policy and make an exemption to incentivise behaviour, it's most appropriate you have a policy in place and then you make a rebate to that, because setting a policy is essentially the same as setting a principle, and that principle is growth should pay for growth, development should pay for growth. At the moment, it's not, and at the moment, ratepayers are subsidising development and growth, and that is not appropriate. And over the next 2 months, we are, if we don't get on and make a decision today, setting up a gold rush on the partners to enable ratepayers to pay for development and for growth, and that's just simply unfair.
Alright.
I'm just going to support the staff recommendation. I think we've talked about the central city and Christchurch. But Takaroa is quite a significant part of this at the moment. It's astronomically expensive to build a house or any sort of property in Akaroa. It's still going to be astronomically expensive after we make a decision today. But at least the cost of building a house is going to be reduced by about 50. In terms of DCs, it's going to be reduced by about 50%. Which is, I mean, the housing market in Akaroa is broken. 2 out of every 3 houses in Akaroa is not permanently occupied. So something has to change. This is a step in the right direction, hopefully. Just makes it easier for people to build, and so I'm supportive of that. We'll wait and see, but I'll support the staff reg today.
Samuel?
Yeah, thank you. I hope people, it sounds like will in terms of supporting the deferment until we get to August. It's simply to take a holistic view on DCs, and I get the arguments that there's the policy and there's a remit scheme, and therefore they should be treated separate. I don't necessarily buy that. I think we need to be making holistic decisions on stuff. It doesn't mean a decision can't be made. I have to say that I did find it deeply ironic that there might be a gold rush in the CBD. Well, a gold rush of more people paying rates, more people spending money building houses. Like, is that not what we want in this city? That's what I thought we were here for, but clearly not. The capital program is, and I accept that the mood wasn't to drill that through today in terms of refinement, but I just do not for a moment accept that when we are deferring $70 million this year of capital budget, that we haven't deferred any for the remaining 9 years of the LTP, that there is no impact on the charge of housing. And that does not sit in a developer's pocket. That literally sits on the cost of a house, particularly in this market. You look at what people are doing to sell houses. So I think that today, by deferring this, we're allowing to see a holistic view of what we can do as a city to enable development. I hope we get that gold rush. Imagine that, more voters in the CBD.
It's a gold rush. People scented plans, not actual buildings.
People living in the CBD. And I get that some people might be scared of more voters moving into the CBD. But actually today, let's have a holistic view in August and make that decision then.
Yep, right. I'll just throw some 5 cents in. We've heard from John how there is a blip going through the system now of people who are getting ahead of the wave. And having said that, I'm sure the tide will go out for a couple of months after that when nothing will come in. So people are already getting in ahead, and I've heard from Alan, and the cost of waiting 2 months is absolutely minimal. So I think we should just wait until we get the whole picture. I don't think anything's going to change. The DCs will go ahead at what they are, but it'd be nice to have everything in front of us when we do it. So I'll be supporting to defer. So any other questions? Or debate, sorry. Oh, right.
Sorry, just process wise, so some, councillor McDonald's amendment is actually a foreshadowed motion because it doesn't actually amend the officer recommendations. So what we'll do is we'll vote on the officer recs as the motion is first, so 1, 2, 6 there, and then if that fails, we would then vote on the.
So a question, sorry, can I ask one question? So if we voted
Both down.
If we voted both down, then does the DCs go away?
No, it's so.
No.
Oh,
Yep.
Status quo, which would be the current policy. that
You could move a new motion if nothing was at the table.
Motion.
It happens.
So
It happens.
one off the rest.
Status quo.
Yeah, staff rec, fine.
I suggest,
Yes. Yes, Sarah.
could I make a suggestion then, Sam, if you wanted to, it means there would be no debate though. That you could potentially move a procedural motion to defer the paper to the same time as the other one, because it's a procedural motion rather than that has to be taken straight away, but there's no debate on a procedural motion, which means you lose the debate.
We've already debated, so, I mean, if we've got, well, I'll just rely on the team's advice if
you
they,
can move a procedural one.
but there's a, yeah. Let's,
It shouldn't matter either which way, so it's just.
If we've already debated.
Let's follow Sam's instruction.
Chicken and eggs.
Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to vote for.
Are we?
Move and second.
Yeah, so the Mayor and Deputy Mayor Cotter moved and seconded the officer recommendations, which is to adopt the policy. So
this is, just so everyone's clear, this is,
Foreshadowed motion, that's all set to go to.
yeah, this is not to defer.
this is to adopt the policy as in the agenda today.
So yes to adopt the policy, no to defer it as per the amendment, or the foreshadowed motion.
Yeah,
And
so
if-
if you want to defer it, you would vote against these.
Yes. Okay, righto. Is everybody clear what we're voting for? Because sometimes it's not.
Yeah,
Okay.
You can do division from the beginning because it's going to be full for anyway.
Okay. All of those in favour of the staff rec in front of us up there, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
No. Do all right.
It's only 11 o'clock.
Need buttons. Need buttons.
Oh,
yeah.
You mean like with Romans used to have.
you're right, Sam?
Okay, so this is the division.
Guys.
Recommendations 1 to 6 to adopt the policy. Councillor Kewen.
No.
Councillor McClellan.
Yes.
Councillor McDonald.
no,
Councillor Henstock.
No.
Councillor Moore.
No.
Councillor Scandrett.
No.
Councillor Harrison Hunt.
Yes.
Councillor Coker.
Yes.
Councillor Peters.
No.
The Mayor. Councillor Templeton.
Aye.
Councillor Barber.
No.
Deputy Mayor Cotter.
Yes.
Councillor Fields.
Yes, to making it easier to build an Akaroa.
Councillor Johansson.
Aye.
Councillor Donovan. Yes. Councillor Goff.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4.
It's the draft. I've got 3
I was
months.
gonna say last, the Tyrone one is Akaroa.
It is lost. Okay, so we now have the foreshadowed motion.
we should just clarify that if this fails.
Yeah.
The DC policy that was in 2021
Stays.
stays.
Which means rate
Yes,
pay.
just difficult, just roll it.
So, right,
Oh, we.
so all of those in favour of the foreshadowed motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried, thank you, and
Yeah.
Danny likes twenty
that's
twenty-one.
brilliant, thank you very much. So I now throw this piece of paper away. Right.
Up at home.